Well, welcome to another episode of our podcast, Indiana is Ag+Bio+Science. It's presented by AgriNovus Indiana and Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gerry, the host of Inside Indiana Business, also the host of this weekly podcast where we have in-depth conversations with leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs in Indiana's Ag+Bio+Science sector. It's the sector where food, agriculture, science, and technology converge. And this week, I'm excited to sit down with Bruce Kettler. Bruce is the director of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. And Bruce, you're a busy guy. Thanks for taking time to stop by Lunch Fishers.
My pleasure.
And have a conversation.
Always glad to.
Lots going on in the world of agriculture and ag bioscience. First of all, though, in terms of your path to your current role, talk a little bit about how you got to lead the Indiana State Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, I have a 30-year professional career in the industry of agriculture. I've always been my professional career in agriculture, and before that, really was numerous roles. I started out in the sales side in the crop protection business. Was with Dow what was Dow Agri-Sciences, of course now Corteva, for about 17 years. Worked in a couple of other roles outside of agriculture, but frankly, I missed the agriculture industry. Then got into the seed side with Beck's hybrids. Worked there for about 11 years, but I've had a lot of different roles, from sales to sales management. Even then, more recently, got involved in advertising and public relations management, and a lot of my last role was really industry and community relations work.
Did you grow up on a farm? Have you always envisioned agriculture as your career?
I really I didn't grow up on a farm, but I really have envisioned it. Both sides of my parents' families were involved in dairy, and I've had uncles that were involved in dairy. My father really, I think, was the one that kind of inspired me on the agriculture side in terms of the crop side. I'm an agronomist by training and background. My dad worked in the crop protection, fertilizer, and seed business, managed independent suppliers and worked with farmers, and I think that's really how I got involved. And then through being active in FFA in high school, that's where it really kind of cemented my love for the industry. And I worked on a dairy farm for 5 years through junior high and high school, and that's where I really, I guess, caught the bug for it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the role and the function of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. One of the things that I think a lot of people would be surprised at, this is an agency that is not very old. 2005 was the creation, so less than 15 years old.
Yeah, we really are a very new agency. It's really interesting. So it was Governor Mitch Daniels that decided that it should become a department. So it does make us very different from our counterparts in other states. We don't have a huge regulatory function within our department. The Grain Buyers and Warehouse Licensing Agency is a regulatory function that we have there. Other than that, we really do things very differently, but we have divisions that are very affected. The soil conservation team that we have is actually about half of the employees of our department. We get involved in economic development for agriculture, including things like the Indiana Grown Program. The state FFA organization, the leadership of the state FFA organization and ag education in the state of Indiana is actually in our department. So again, it is very different. I guess it's probably, to me, it's really about we are a champion for the industry, and we're really strong advocates for the industry instead of having a strong regulatory function within Indiana.
Give us your take on the state of agriculture in Indiana. We can talk a little bit in a moment about some of the challenges with planting and weather-related things, but overall, there's so much going on when you look at the things that AgriNovus is involved in so many ways. The Ag Bioscience sector, all these areas seems to be momentum and a focus on ag around the state of Indiana. What's your take?
Yeah, when you look at it at a high level, notwithstanding the current specific day-to-day piece, but at a high level, I'm really proud of this industry here because we're very diverse. A lot of people don't realize it. We're diverse in terms of our crops. Most people think of us as corn and soy, and yes, we have a lot of that. But you look at the tomatoes and the specialty crops that we have around the state, things like even like mint, we have a lot of that. Then you look at our livestock sectors, and livestock is also very diverse. So we've got pork, we've got dairy and beef. The poultry industry, even just within the poultry industry, is extremely diverse. Everything from eggs to turkeys to ducks, of course. 60% of the ducks in the United States are raised in Indiana. So you look at that diversification on crops and livestock, and then that leads, in my mind, to things like when we look at an organization like AgriNovus and the biosciences and the importance of that bioscience is important for crops, but it's also important on the livestock sector. And I think that's what's really good about the diversification that we have, is that it does bring the science to us. So we know that technology is becoming an increasingly important part of our industry. And organizations like AgriNovus and the companies that are participating in this effort really do help us diversify, keep that diversification strong, because then the technology is also going to be diversified when it comes to bear in Indiana.
More current, real-time challenges. One with the weather. It's been very wet spring. Give us your take on where farmers are at right now with planting.
It's really not very good, unfortunately. Most recent report has us about 6% on corn, about 2 or 3% on soybeans. Normally, by now, our 5-year average is somewhere between 55 and 60% on corn. So we're way, way behind. And then you add to that the challenges in the market with, particularly on the crop side, especially soybeans, with the issues with China and the trade situation there. Of course, we don't have the USMCA agreement ratified. That I think most farmers would say we want to get that done. That would really help. We knew China was going to take a while, and wasn't going to be easy. So that on top of that, when we delay this planning significantly like we had, that really adds a lot of stress on the farm. And I know our farmers are stressed, and we're thinking about them, praying that every day that we find a way and find a window to make this improve and be able to get this crop in the ground. Really, farmers, they want to plant. It's in their blood, it's in their DNA to be able to raise crops, raise livestock, and that's what they want to be able to do.
Yeah, you mentioned the USMC, the new NAFTA, if you will.
Right.
What's your take? What are Indiana farmers thinking with respect to that new agreement?
Well, it's a critical agreement, I think, for Indiana in my mind, because when you look at Canada and Mexico, of course, on both our borders, just the physical locations mean that we should be able to be exporting a lot of goods to those countries, and we do. Canada, from a crop side, even on the livestock side, Mexico certainly on the livestock side, especially with poultry and with pork, are big. So that's why I think it's really critical that agreement get put in place. We want to take care of those things that are the closest to us, and those two countries certainly allow Indiana, because of our transportation network, it allows us to be able to be in a really strong position to export products to those two countries. Mm-hmm.
According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's latest census, Indiana's ag sector remains truly an anchor of the state's economy. In your view, how will Indiana continue this momentum? How are the Ag Biosciences really important in this growth plan?
Well, I'll go back to that diversification we talked about, because that really, I think, anytime we can diversify, again, our crops or our livestock sectors, it does a couple of things. One, on the science side, and for Ag Bioscience, it will attract technology. It will attract people that want to have that technology into our agriculture markets here. And again, that technology is not going to be focused on just one crop or one sector of the livestock. I think it helps to be able to have that diversification, and that will allow those biosciences to be diversified. And the thing that I'm realizing as I get involved with AgriNovus and these tech companies is they really have figured out that they know that they might be working on one thing, but they need other folks to be able to get involved in that. And I think that's the beauty of what an AgriNovus brings to the table. When you bring a lot of different thoughts, you bring a lot of different potential technologies together, and those folks start to work on and they develop new ideas, and then as they talk, new ideas might even come out of those conversations. And I think that's what's really part of the benefit of what an AgriNovus and the companies that are getting involved here with our industry really bring to ag. It continues that diversification that we need and that we want, and we're not just focused on one type of technology.
Don't know how much you can talk about this, but I've got to ask you, the news recently that the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which announced plans some months ago to move two key divisions, if you will, outside of Washington, D.C., to a new location. Indiana among three finalists for that, which would be a combined, I think, 600 jobs. I think sites at Purdue and here in Indianapolis in the running. What can you tell us about the potential that has and what kind of impact that could potentially have?
Yeah, I probably have to be pretty careful about what I can say, other than I think it says a lot about our system, our ecosystem, if you will, in Indiana from an agriculture perspective. You know, the fact that AgriNovus and the State Department of Agriculture and the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and Purdue and all of these entities can work together, it just goes back to collaboration. And I guess the important part about that potential for USDA to come here is, I think as I look at what they're after, that's really a big part of what they want, is the ability for those folks that work for ERS and for NIFA to be able to have closer connections to the people that they serve, the constituents that they're serving, but then the potential to collaborate with industry, with state government, local government. It's that collaboration piece that I think that's where Indiana really shines and really does a great job, is that ability to collaborate and not say, okay, I want to take, so I got to have the credit for everything that happens. That part of that is really important. And of course, then you start to look at the cost, and certainly that's part of what USDA has been involved in. They want to try to find a way to be able to make it cheaper to be able to run their services, but then get them closer to the people and constituents they're going to be serving.
Final question for you. You're on the board of AgriNovus, and ISDA, in fact, was one of the inaugural supporters and true champions for the organization. Why is it important, in your view, for ISDA to have a really close partnership with a group like AgriNovus?
Well, agriculture historically has been so reliant upon innovation and invention. When I think back to just even 100 years ago, what agriculture looked like, I mean, 100 years may seem like a long time, but if you really think about it in terms of innovation and invention, it's not. It's just amazing to me every day how that's changed. So I think the reason that we need to be involved and tied together is it allows us to be able to create that environment where technology, innovation, invention can thrive and be a part of it. And then you combine that with the business environment that Indiana has, and the fact that we embrace that, we want to have that. We've got low taxes, we have people that want to be here, and it's just really it's important for us to focus in this case on what Ag Biosciences can bring. And I think it will drive a ton of technology and advancement for our farmers, and that's where again the companies that are involved in AgriNovus and the environment that AgriNovus creates, it really does that. And then for us as the State Department of Agriculture, then we can get involved with AgriNovus, with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and companies themselves, and figuring out how are we going to grow and expand or land that talent and attract them here.
Bruce Kettler is the director of the Indiana State Department of Agriculture. Bruce, thanks for your leadership. Also, thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. And thank you for joining us this week on the Ag+Bio+Science podcast. It is a weekly production partnership between AgriNovus Indiana and Inside Indiana Business. Keep up to date with AgriNovus by following them on Twitter and Instagram at AgriNovus IN, and finding them on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm Gerry Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
This podcast is a product of Inside Indiana Business, hosted by Gerry Dick. produced by Libby Fritz and Joe Ullery and was recorded on location at Launch Fishers. More people get Indiana business news from Inside Indiana Business than any other source.